oh, there's so many lawsuits. If you don't protect us, we're going to go out of business. Well, guess what's wrong with that logic? If your products are hurting so many people that the lawsuits are stacking up, if you're harming so many people that you need protection from the government, by all means, please do us all a favor. Go out of business. Well, I guess this is supposed to be our golden age, right? You've got the dream team of Bobby Kennedy and President Trump in the White House. It's a year later. Why does it feel like corporations are winning more than the American people? What's going on exactly? I mean, we had such high hopes for this administration, and it feels like slowly but surely all of the priorities that we had, the America First, things that were really important for Maha, are just getting pummeled and then served back to us as Fed slop. Unfortunately, you don't have to look any further than the glyphosate debacle to see evidence of this Truman Show, this nightmare that just seems to be one bad dream after another. The fact that Bobby Kennedy was asked to sell this policy to the American people adds insult to injury, because he was part of the legal team that got the first settlement for glyphosate. $290 million. It was Monsanto at the time, because that was before they sold Roundup to Bayer, the German company. And the gentleman that got that settlement had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was a really big deal. But now you have one of the lawyers that was part of the legal team in that settlement, who's head of HHS, trying to convince the American people that giving Bayer protection from any liability, because more lawsuits are now coming forward, is okay. How is that okay? In what world are we supposed to just accept a complete 180? And why is Secretary Kennedy being asked to sell this to the American people? This isn't even an HHS policy. This is from the EPA. Why don't you get Lee Zeldin out there to take the slings and arrows? Because you think Bobby Kennedy is going to convince us that it's okay, that row farmers are really going to go out of business and the world's food supply is going to collapse? Why don't we put that effort into regenerative farming and organic farmers? Because this is the same song and dance that we heard about vaccine makers in 1986. Oh, there's so many lawsuits. If you don't protect us, we're going to go out of business. Well, guess what's wrong with that logic? If your products are hurting so many people that the lawsuits are stacking up, you should go out of business. If you're harming so many people that you need protection from the government, from all these lawsuits, by all means, please do us all a favor. Go out of business. Bayer should stop making Roundup. Get it out of our food supply. Get it out of the air, for heaven's sakes. It's sprayed everywhere. It's almost impossible to avoid it. This is the only logical solution. And the idea that the American people are so stupid that we would believe this excuse, that you would neglect the opportunity to actually support the good farmers, the regenerative organic farmers, where many of us are buying our food anyway, it's just crazy. We are in the Truman Show. You are so underestimating the American people, and you're underestimating the Maha movement, and we don't like it. It's bad enough, everything that we've been through with Epstein and now Charlie Kirk, and we're supposed to be believe the Fed slop on Charlie Kirk. It's just insane. Let's not forget that this is the first president in modern history that ever uttered the words vaccine and autism in the same sentence. He was just a candidate back then in 2015. But let me refresh your memory in case you've forgotten.
Autism has become an epidemic. 25 years ago, 35 years ago, you look at the statistics, not even close. And you pump, I mean, it looks just like it's meant for a horse, not for a child. 2 years old, 2.5 years old, a child, a beautiful child, went to have the vaccine and came back and a week later got a tremendous fever, got very, very sick, now is autistic.
Yeah, so here we are, 2 Trump terms later. Nothing has been done about vaccines, in my opinion, but performance art. Nothing substantial. It looks like that we're headed for the same kind of disappointment with autism and vaccines that we're seeing with glyphosate. Even though, Trump has stated publicly this is the most important thing in his presidency. And yes, I know glyphosate did not even include a compensation program like vaccines do. But this is a huge disappointment. And I want to take everybody back to where this whole safe and effective lie about vaccines was baked in, because this started a long time ago. It actually started on June 1st of 1984, when the FDA published in the Federal Register that despite scientific evidence that was coming forward to indicate there were some safety concerns about the polio vaccine, the information was going to be dismissed in order to prevent any doubts about the safety and efficacy of vaccines creeping into the public domain. What? Oh, yeah, we're afraid that Americans might think for themselves. And so since there's legitimate evidence coming forward about the polio vaccine, we don't want there to be vaccine hesitancy. We don't want to, threaten that safe and effective meme. So we're just going to dismiss it. We don't want the public to have any misunderstanding about the safety and the efficacy of these precious vaccines that we're just going to protect over people. It would just be too confusing because the American people are too stupid. We're not stupid at all. And in fact, the more that you think we're stupid, the smarter we get. Because we can see clearly that the FDA is not working for the American people. They're working for the companies that make these products. This is the regulatory capture that Bobby Kennedy used to talk about before he was Secretary of HHS. The sock puppets for the industry they're supposed to regulate. Well, this FDA final rule that they published in the Federal Register was definitely a big statement in them doubling down on this culture of vaccine injury denialism. And of course, we know that the next big key milestone was the 1986 Act, which gave complete immunity from any prosecution to vaccine makers. Now you have to sue the government. No judge, no jury, just a special master, because we are all slaves, clearly. The blanket immunity policy from the 1986 Act was also supposed to actually provide the public with a no-fault compensation program for the vaccine injured, a component, I might add, that's missing from the glyphosate ruling. From the glyphosate policy, there's no compensation there, but whatever. We continue. This no-fault compensation program was supposed to provide swift and generous compensation for the vaccine injured. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go as planned. And once vaccine makers got immunity from any prosecution, they just started adding more and more vaccines to the schedule like drunken sailors. Blank check, carte blanche, no problem. We're not going to be held accountable. Let's just keep adding more and more and more until now we have 73 by the age of 18 and sicker children than we've ever had in our country. So justice in this system has been anything but swift and generous. Let's talk a little bit about the injury table, which was supposed to be a tool that would easily assist the vaccine injured with determining their eligibility for vaccine court and taking the burden of proof off of them about causation. It was a list of acceptable diagnoses that would, if you experienced, or your family or child or loved one, you experienced one of these diagnoses, you would be eligible for compensation if it was post-vaccination. Scientists started to get a signal that residual seizure disorder, it's kind of a tongue twister, RSD, and encephalopathy. RSD and encephalopathy were two conditions that would be acceptable diagnoses for autism. As soon as there were settlements coming through in the vaccine court for autism. Both of those conditions were taken off the injury table. Why? Oh, we can't have too many of those because that's going to cause problems. So let's just take RSD off the table and we'll redefine encephalopathy really narrowly as to not include autism. That should do it. It did it all right. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of families that were due settlement for autism in the vaccine court completely denied. Nothing to see here. Just protecting the industry once again. We're going to make the problem go away because if people found out, oh my goodness, if they find out that vaccines cause autism, oh, they might stop vaccinating. It's going to create too much doubt and confusion for the feeble-minded sheeple. They're going to start to doubt the vaccine program. This would be so terrible, right? Yeah, it would be terrible, except that it's true. And that's exactly what the American people need to know. And that's the casualty of war, right? Truth. And this is war. These families no longer had a pathway to judgment for autism caused by vaccine injury. And it was tragic, and it continues to be tragic to this day. That's one thing President Trump could do, put it back on the table. Because autism rates are continuing to rise. You claim, President Trump, that autism is the most important issue in your administration. More than the border, more than tariffs, should be more important than bombing Iran, in my opinion, protecting other countries. I love Israel, but I put America first. Why can't we add RSD, residual seizure disorder, and encephalopathy as it was originally defined back to the table and allow these families to be compensated? Let's talk about the third casualty in this war, and that's the VSD, the Vaccine Safety Database. This was a vehicle that was established in 1990 by the CDC, and it's designed to collect health outcomes for Americans post-vaccination. An important component in looking at accountability with vaccinations. But something really strange happened in 2003 with the VSD, which now contains records, by the way, upwards of 15 plus million Americans. And that is that management of this data was taken out of the hands of the CDC and handed over to Kaiser and other HMO groups. A little move that I would like to call the fox guarding the hen house. Of course, the most damaging effect of the CDC completely distancing themselves from health outcomes of millions of Americans and handing over this precious data, which, by the way, it belongs to Americans. That's our data. We should have a right to it. Is that the VSD became completely unavailable for plaintiffs who are looking for compensation in the vaccine court. This is important data. And unfortunately, scientists that want to run studies of this data, not a hard thing to do with the advent of computer systems. We could do a vax versus unvax study relative to autism in 5 hours. But by taking this data out of the CDC and putting it in the hands of private enterprise, the data is now unavailable for Americans or scientists or even plaintiffs in the vaccine court. You can't even FOIA. That's a Freedom of Information Act request. You can't FOIA the data. And several attorneys have actually tried in vaccine court. They submitted discovery requests for this data in 2005, 2012, and 2013. They did it as a special exception through the special masters. And whoa, guess what? Lo and behold, the Department of Justice stepped in and aggressively stopped it. They denied the request by these lawyers to have access to this data. Yet another demonstration by our government that we are living in a world of vaccine injury denialism, and that the agencies that are supposed to protect the American people are instead, in the name of protecting public confidence, protecting the industries and the corporations that make them. So let's fast forward to December of 2025. We have two esteemed scientists from Children's Health Defense, which is the very organization that Bobby Kennedy founded years ago, where he built his reputation as a health freedom fighter, standing up for children. These two scientists published a study. This is an important study. This is not anything that we've had published in the public domain before, and it's a shocking study. Now, both of these scientists, Dr. Brian Hulscher and Dr. Karl Jablonowski, published information that they were able to obtain from the state of Louisiana. This is Medicare, I believe, Medicare, Medicaid data, not the VSSD data, because can't touch this, right? Not allowed to access that. But they published this paper from this data obtained from the Louisiana healthcare system, showing, shockingly, the increased rate of child mortality associated with 2-month-old infant vaccinations. Now, you would think this is important information, right, for public health. Because in this paper, both Hulscher and Jablonowski exposed that infant mortality rates doubled after they received early childhood vaccinations compared to unvaccinated children. That means that infants at their 2-month wellness check, if they got all the vaccines that are recommended by the CDC, there would be a 68% increased risk that they would be dead by the 3rd month of age, and 114% more likely to be dead if they were girls. And there's an increased risk for African Americans, by the way. This is a big deal. And we talked to Dr. Jablonowski about it the other day. Listen to what he had to say.
It's higher across the board. It's higher in blacks than it is in whites, and it's much higher in girls. And we do touch on biological plausibility because males and females are inherently different, and our immune systems at that age is very different. Males are born with an immune system that's more exploratory, kind of, what's out there that I should be afraid of, whereas girls' immune systems are just ready to fight right out of it, right out of the womb, and that ready to fight can cause an overreaction of the immune system to the 2-month vaccinations, and that 2-month well checkup is a huge onslaught of antigens. It is the largest single-day antigenic assault that any human is likely to encounter, maybe for the exception of, vaccinations in the military, but even they have the common sense to limit it.
Let's let Dr. Jablonowski remind us of exactly how many vaccines and what they are that are included in the 2-month wellness check.
There's the RSV, which is a fairly recent monoclonal antibody. It's not technically a vaccine. You would call it an immunization. There's a hepatitis B vaccine, which often has, both options have a lot of aluminum in it. There's a rotavirus vaccine, which one version of it has up to 5 live viruses. There's diphtheria, tetanus, and acellular pertussis. There's Hib. The pneumococcal vaccine can have up to 20 different variants of pneumococcal. And the polio vaccine covers 3 different polio strains, 2 of which were eradicated a long time ago. You have to contort logic to figure out why you're still giving 3-strain polio vaccine when 2 of them don't exist anymore. This was the CDC recommended schedule for 2-month-old infants. Vaccines are inherently not safe. And, unless some catapult in our scientific understanding happens, they're not going to be safe anytime soon.
So, if you take your baby girl to her well visit at 2 months, and she's given all the vaccines on the CDC schedule, you have a 114% increased risk of her dying within a month. Is that something that you can live with? And is that something that you can live with when I'm about to tell you what I'm about to tell you? Which is that after this paper was published in preprint, less than 30 days later, that paper was taken down.
You know, when we published our preprint, it was met with a pretty wide acceptance. They had about 14,000 hits by the time preprint.org sent us an email saying that it's going to be withdrawn and removed from preprints.org. And they said it was at the request of the advisory board and in line with the withdrawal policy.
It wasn't featured on the front page of the New York Times. It wasn't on CNN. It wasn't anywhere in mainstream media, as it should have been. Because, that would cause doubt in the system. We can't have any doubt. We have to protect the system. Dr. Jablonowski crafted a very well thought response that he sent to preprints after the paper was pulled down. And of course, he didn't hear back. None of the people that are the decision makers at preprints even have any kind of background in vaccinology.
They did not respond to it. I then reached out to every member of the advisory board that fell under pharmaceutical and medicine. None of them fessed up to saying that, yes, we retracted this paper. One of them actually said, quote, preprints generally do not withdraw. This must have been some obvious mistake on their part, which I think I can appreciate the naivete.
When Just the News did finally contact preprints themselves, they were told there was too much of a risk of misunderstanding. The public might misunderstand.
After careful evaluation by the advisory board, it was determined that the content could pose a risk of public misunderstanding.
Yeah, goes back to the Federal Register, doesn't it? 1984. It's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 1984 Federal Registry really can sum up our experience when they said any possible doubt, whether or not well-founded, about the safety of vaccines cannot be allowed to exist. Now, that's not just impinging on scientific freedoms. That's impinging on the freedom of thought. You cannot have the thought that a vaccine might be unsafe, whether or not well-founded.
Yes, once again, at least they're consistent with their cover-up. But the really tragic thing here is that Secretary Kennedy could release the vaccine safety data just like that. He could release it with a stroke of a pen.
The hardest part of the job is getting the data. The science part is practically formulaic. I mean, it's just, you write a few lines of code and it turns out the answers, but it's getting the data.
Why isn't he doing it? Why isn't he releasing the data? Listen to Dr. Jablonowski tell you just how bad it would be for the vaccine makers.
Data of when children get vaccinated, at what age, and high resolution of when bad outcomes happen. You have it all right there, but it's never made public, and even when it is, it's really obfuscated. Summing up the entire first year of a child's life in one number is not nearly as helpful as being able to pick apart the actual day of life that the child was vaccinated and the day of life that some bad outcome happened, or even death. With that amount of high resolution data, you can do a whole lot of things, and I think the ship of safe and effective will sink pretty quickly.
The sad truth is that the platonic lie in all of this, which of course is that, this whole cover-up is that you have to sacrifice a few for the greater good. That's the platonic lie. You have to kill 10 to save 20. Except that's not what's happening. And yet another paper came out, this one, February 17th, 2026, a study published, this one revealing that the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, is actually killing more children than measles. And this was published by epidemiologist and administrator for the McCullough Foundation, Nicholas Hulscher. This paper, too, you can guess, was pulled in preprint by the publication that had released it. Not on the front page of the New York Times, not anywhere, CNN, mainstream media, nowhere. The reason given again? Because it poses a threat to public security or public health. I mean, the opposite is true. Not releasing this information is creating great harm and concern for the public health. Let's hear what Nicholas Hulscher had to say about that.
And we looked at the MMR and MMRV vaccines, which are currently given to kids in America. It's their only option for measles vaccination. And what we found is shocking. We found hundreds of deaths among infants and toddlers within just days of MMR vaccination. And they died from SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, cardiac arrests, encephalitis, so brain inflammation, seizures, and many of them developed very high fevers before death. And over half of these children died within just 2 weeks of the shot. And most of these deaths occurred in 1 to 2 year olds. So right when they get these doses. And so, but the shocking thing is we also looked at how many measles infection deaths there were. So we've identified just 7 since 95. And with the vaccine, there was 2,600% more vaccine-associated deaths than measles infection since 1995. So for the past 30 years, the vaccines have been killing more babies than measles infection. These doctors are not doing their jobs if they do not understand all of the current studies on the adverse events of the shots they're giving. They're committing malpractice. They should be upholding their oath, do no harm, and understanding all of the risks and giving the patients informed consent, but they're not doing that. And so that's very disturbing. And actually, our MMR paper was deleted from ResearchGate, one of the servers we posted it on. They claimed it was a threat to public security and public health. Studies delete them, retract them, and they get away with it. And this appears to be, a part of a racketeering influence, corrupt organizations enterprise, a RICO enterprise that is involved in these illicit activities of censoring critical pharmaceutical safety data.
And I asked Nick, who are the people behind the industry that are actually colluding in this cover-up and this lie? And I think you're going to hear some very familiar organizations.
Policy, we call it the biopharmaceutical complex, this transnational syndicate of public health agencies, pharma companies, NGOs, the World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, Rockefeller Foundation, Gates Foundation, Clinton Foundations, and governments, executive branches.
Same players over and over again.
The same exact players, and they're responsible for the gain of function research of basically manufacturing a pathogen and declaring the emergencies from that made pathogen and developing the countermeasure to the pathogen that was manufactured. And so it's basically they can initiate a fabricated emergency through synthetic means, and while at the same time mandating these countermeasures on the population. So it's a very serious situation. And so that happened in 2020. And that biopharmaceutical complex is still operational.
Nick also confirmed, as did Dr. Jablonowski, that if the VSD data were released and Americans were given access to their data, this is our vaccine safety data, we would see dramatic consequences for the industry.
The public would be very, very angry, and it would all be revealed just how dangerous the mRNA shots were, and even some of these childhood vaccines. It would collapse the public trust in those agencies completely, and so that's probably why they don't do it. But yeah, it needs to happen. They can't hide this information from the public when they're continuously administering these products still to the public. They have to be fully transparent, release all the data they have. We know it back from the Senate hearing last year that the FDA was hiding heart damage signals in children. They had the data. They refused to disclose it. We now know that Israel, we just published a peer-reviewed paper on that. They buried heart damage signals in 2021. And we know Australia did as well. And so, again, we cannot be hiding this information from the public.
So what's happening to some of the good people that are getting in at HHS?
Yeah. Right now, HHS is being gutted. I mean, it was already gutted. It was, right when they were installed, Secretary Kennedy got in. There were some, positive changes being made, positive installations of certain people that were making positive moves. Such as canceling mRNA shot contracts with BARDA, $500 million worth. He got fired, Dr. Stephen Hatfield. He fired, he was told to pack his bags, and I guess Secretary Kennedy never gave him a call. But he was making really positive steps, and now again we see Dr. Abraham, he's mysteriously resigning. They just fired the interim CDC director or moved him somewhere else. And now Jay Bhattacharya is somehow going to run the CDC and NIH. I don't know how that's going to happen. Shouldn't have one guy running two agencies that require, one person each to run them because they're such large agencies. And I've been made aware that, many efforts are being made to initiate studies on vaccine injury, looking at reproductive damage from the shot.
So here we are. We're a nation stuck at the trough of the Fed slop narrative, being asked to swallow the manipulation of our hero as acceptable. Is he tragically the victim of a president that's captured by corporate greed? Or is he now part of the problem? I mean, some of the good guys that have made it into HHS aren't staying very long. They're not lasting. They're either getting fired or they're quitting. And it's tragic. It's looking less and less like Secretary Kennedy is going to release the VSD. That's what we need more than anything. Stroke of a pen, he could do it. I don't think he's going to do it. Maybe he's now part of the agency and regulatory capture syndrome that he used to talk about, whether wittingly or unwittingly, maybe he's now part of the system. Is this going to change? Are we just going to continue to live in a culture of vaccine injury denialism? Are we going to continue to let the federal government deprive us of our own data that would prove that vaccines are causing harm? Are we going to continue to accept the fact that they believe that we're too stupid, or maybe we're smart enough? Maybe the government actually knows how smart we are and that we would figure this out. This is clearly a collusion of cover-up. It's got to stop. Until next time, we're just getting started.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.